without thinking about it, I just started praying. Oh, I'm gonna cry. Hey guys, it's Brenna. Welcome back to my channel. Let me just start by saying I am so beyond grateful for all of the love and support that came in after I released my last video about being sober. It was astonishing how many people reached out and how many people are actually going through the exact same thing. This is gonna be the story of the day that I finally had a shift in my life that allowed me to be able to stop drinking for a year and then ultimately forever. If you haven't watched my first video, I will put a link in the description below, but I would definitely watch that one first because this video is actually going to be a sub story that I briefly touched on in my first video but did not go into detail about. And so before I do that, I do want to make a disclaimer on a couple of things. The first thing is that my story is my personal story. It's what worked for me, and I am in no way saying this is a be all to fix all kind of solution for people. If you are someone who drinks very heavily or very often, I would not recommend cutting alcohol out cold turkey. Please seek medical advice before you do that. And I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page. If you think that you will have withdrawal symptoms, please see a doctor so that you can do it in a safe way. So before I actually go into the specific day that honestly changed my life forever, I want to talk about what was happening to me leading up to this day. I was suffering from, the only thing I can think of is to call it anxiety. I would often feel very faint and my breathing would get really shallow. I also experienced this weird sensation of not being able to swallow often, which would then make me think that I wasn't going to be able to breathe, and then I would get this like impending sense of doom, and it would make me almost get lightheaded and have to sit down and my heartbeat would be racing. And so I don't know if that's anxiety, but this kind of event would happen to me pretty often. And of course it would happen when I was hungover because your body is just so out of whack. So I would definitely get these symptoms during those times, but I would also get these symptoms times when I wasn't drinking. And this is just my personal opinion, but I honestly think that my body was reacting to the mental struggle going on in my mind. I think because I was spending so much time stressing about knowing I needed to quit drinking and how I was gonna do that, and I didn't want to do it, and just like all of these thoughts were like constantly running through my head every day because, you know, it really is a battle when you're trying to quit drinking. So I was warring in my mind, and I think my body was responding to that through anxiety. My body was screaming at me, and I kept ignoring it for a long time until this particular day when I no longer could ignore it. So here's the story. I had gone down to where I went to university in order to visit some of my really good friends. And so the weekend was over, and then on the day that I was supposed to drive back, I woke up. I decided to have this big fat coffee from one of my favorite coffee shops that I used to go to all the time in college. So at this point, I'm not hungover because I didn't really drink that much, but I still felt like crap. And I think this was, like I said, just my body was screaming at me and I was still ignoring it. So I went and got a coffee, and this coffee was pretty much mostly sugar, and I got an extra shot of espresso in it, which I think contributed to a lot of my downfall. I get this coffee as I'm like about to drive home, and I get in my car. So about 10 minutes into the drive, I'm drinking this coffee, and I don't know, dude, like where the state of my body was, I started to not feel good. One of the symptoms I first started to experience was just like an outer body experience. Like I don't know how to explain it, but as I was driving, I just started to feel like I wasn't able to focus on the road. And so about 15 minutes into the drive, I actually pulled over, and I remember going down to the river. I had parked right by a river, and I was so mad at myself because I had just drank this whole coffee, and now I was feeling so sick and just so fatigued and faint and weak that I was having this, you know, difficult time driving home. And I collected my breath, my heart rate slowed back down, and I decided that I was okay to drive again. I ended up pulling over probably 3 or 4 times in the 40-minute drive trying to get home. And I needed to get home. And you know, guys, I feel like this would be the point of the story, like, of course, looking back, that I would have advised someone to like call a friend to come get me. But you have to remember, there is deep shame in how I'm feeling right now. I was so angry, and I felt so much shame and embarrassment about the fact that I was having this episode that I did not want anyone to know. So I am about 10 minutes from my house. So we're at this 4-way intersection, and my car is the first car at the intersection for my side. And as I'm waiting at the light, the anxiety starts to rise immediately. And this was unlike anything I had experienced ever in my life, and I've never experienced it since this day. But first I started getting this like ringing in my ears. Then I started to have my vision slowly start to almost like dark gray clouds like coming into the center of my vision. And even though that was obviously really bad, the worst part was that my foot that was on the brake pedal started to shake uncontrollably. And I remember so distinctly that my foot was shaking so bad, I actually had to take my other foot and with both feet like push on the brake to keep my car from lunging into the middle of this intersection, because I genuinely could not get my foot to stop shaking. And because I couldn't get my foot to stop shaking, it started stressing me out. And then that's when I noticed, you know, the ears and the vision going. And while this was happening, guys, I started having all of these thoughts about what could have played out next. I genuinely thought that I was gonna faint in this car. And if I fainted, was I gonna hurt someone? Was I gonna hurt myself? Were the cops gonna come and I was gonna get arrested and then my parents were gonna find out? You know, there was, in that moment, I really can't explain it, but it was like all of these scenarios for how this could play out just started running through my head, and none of them were good. And I just remembered this rage starting to build inside of me of absolutely not. This cannot be the reality of what happens in this moment. I cannot have this be what happens, because if any of these scenarios play out, my life is not over, but it was definitely going to be the wake-up call that I did not want to have. And I don't know what took over me, guys, because at this point I was not spiritual, I was not religious of any kind, I was very much agnostic, but without thinking about it, I just started praying. Oh, I'm gonna cry. And I literally said, God, higher power, if I can get through this light and pull over, I will make a change. This will not be my future. I will do something different. Just please, if anyone is listening, please help me avoid this moment becoming the worst day of my life. And so, you know, I finished that prayer, and my light turned green, and I remember putting my foot on the gas, and because my foot was shaking, I lunged forward. But as soon as that lunge was over, I had this moment of like tranquility, like everything stopped. And in those next few moments, I was able to successfully cross the road and pull over. There was a Walgreens right on the corner. I pulled into this Walgreens and I parked, I opened my door, and I threw myself out of my car onto the grass median, and I just started to cry. I just started to lose it. I was just crying and so grateful that nothing happened, that I was safe, that everyone was safe. So I sat there for a few minutes, and I really can't explain this feeling, but there was this shift that I felt happen inside of me. Almost like when you develop a resolve about something. And that is what happened in that moment. All of a sudden, I just decided. I made a decision like I've never made in my life, and it just flipped this switch in my body, like I said, and everything changed. I didn't know at the time how deep that resolve had become and how impactful it would be in my life, but I am not joking with you. Since that day, I have not wanted to drink. It was this incredibly freeing feeling of, I don't even have to fight this feeling anymore. Hey, editing Brenna. Just wanted to clear up what I meant by it was a relief to not have to fight this feeling. What I'm referring to there is all the times I had tried to stop drinking before. Internally, I still really wanted to drink, but I would try and like change my external situation so that that internal feeling would go away. But this was the first time that I didn't want to drink for like an intrinsic reason. It didn't matter what anyone else wanted me to do. I didn't want to drink anymore. Even when I was alone, I didn't want to drink, and that was something I had never experienced before. I ended up driving home completely fine, almost in a zen-like state. And that was when I got back to my house and I told my sister, like, I'm not going to drink for 3 months. So that was my story of the day that honestly changed my life. It still blows my mind. I really can't explain a lot of it, but that's what happened. And to this day, I no longer crave alcohol. I think that is one of the pivotal reasons why I was able to stop on my own. And that plus being codependent, which don't worry guys, that video is coming. But that's not really a very common thing. And if you're not someone who can stop on your own, you are in the majority. I think for me, alcoholism is a symptom of a deeper underlying problem, which is my codependency. And so if you're listening to my story and you've tried to stop and you can't stop on your own, that is so normal, and you are not the only one that feels that way. So listen to my story, but don't take it to be the way that it should look for you. Everyone's different. Hey guys, Brenna here. So while I was editing this video, I actually decided to go and look for that journal entry that I wrote the day that this all happened, and I found it. It's honestly kind of tough to read it, but I figure if anyone's watching, they might resonate with this. So, you know, let's read it together. It's not very long. But this was on October 8th, 2017. And it says, okay, so I'm at a low point right now. I decided to drink an entire coffee before I headed home, and it has turned out to be the worst decision I could have made. I've had to stop 3 times to calm my nerves, and on the 3rd stop, I thought I was going to pass out while driving. I'm scared. Why do I always do this to myself? I'm starting to break. Why must I have such bad discipline? I'm reckless and a slow learner, but this is a huge fuck up that I won't tolerate anymore. I hereby vow to be sober until the end of the year. Yep, I just said it. I've finally hit my breaking point. It's time to finally start getting my shit together. And so that, I don't even think writing that I understood what had happened to me on that day. But, you know, telling myself I didn't have discipline, saying that I was reckless and a slow learner, like I was so negative about myself, but I genuinely thought that everything was within my control and I just wasn't controlling it properly. And so this might be something that resonates with you guys. And whether or not you identify as an alcoholic or not, I think people give themselves a little too much credit with how much they're able to control themselves with drinking. Because for some people like me, you really don't have that power. But if you think you do is when you drive yourself mad. And so I drove myself mad, beating myself up, thinking that I just was missing something inside of me that would allow me to control it, when the whole point of having alcohol abuse problems is because you don't have the ability to have that control. And so I really think that people who are watching this and they're just kind of trying to sit there and figure out in their mind like where they fall in this like huge spectrum, this is something that someone in AA told me once, and it like shooketh me to my core. So I'm gonna just tell you guys. And when she said this, I was so mad. So you might get mad, I'm sorry, but it was very true, and it kind of put things in perspective for me. And here it is. She said, if you are the type of person who has to manage your alcohol, and this could look like, oh, I'm only going to drink on weekdays, or I'm only going to have 3 beers, or, you know, whatever. I'm not going to drink after midnight. If you have to put management practices in place for your drinking, that is a sign that you have trouble with your drinking. Because, and this is crazy for me to think as well, like there are people out there who don't have to put any parameters around their drinking because they just genuinely don't abuse alcohol. And I'm not saying that if you fall into this category, you're like an alcoholic, so I don't want to say that, but I am saying that if you try and like put practices in place to monitor your drinking, then that in itself is a sign that your drinking is escaping you. And I feel like when I heard that for the first time, it was just helpful because as someone who is a problem drinker and has been since the first time I drank, really, I think I was, you know, born that way. I think it's really hard to understand what the baseline for normal is. And it's also comforting to know that my threshold for normal was so like it was blown out of proportion. Like I had to enforce rules because my drinking was crazy otherwise. Anyway, so yeah, that was just like another thing that I learned, and just something if you're trying to figure out where you fall on the spectrum of like having a drinking problem or just being a problem drinker or binge drinker, you know, alcohol abuser or whatever. This is just like things that I was told in my early recovery that helped me kind of solidify that I did have a problem with drinking and get a better like mental understanding of what does normal drinking look like, and then that wasn't me, and so it helped me to just realize like, okay, I don't fall in that category, so I must have some form of like problems with drinking. So maybe that'll help you guys, I don't know. But now we'll get back to the video. With that, I mean, that's pretty much this whole story. And again, thank you for everyone who has watched my first video and sent me a message. It means so much to me. And if sharing my story helps someone feel less alone or helps someone feel motivated to change their narrative, then I'm so happy to share. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.